The forest was unnervingly silent, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. Moonlight filtered weakly through the thick canopy, casting pale, trembling shadows on the damp earth. A lone figure stumbled forward, each step hesitant, weighted with desperation. His fur, matted and soaked from the evening's rain, clung to his gaunt frame. His breath came in ragged bursts, visible in the cold night air, mingling with the faint scent of pine and decay. The wolf's amber eyes darted anxiously through the darkness, scanning the underbrush for any sign of movement, any glimmer of hope. His ears twitched at every distant crack, every rustle, but no friendly sound emerged. Instead, an oppressive stillness pressed down on him, heavy as the fog curling along the forest floor. He paused beneath a gnarled oak, his muzzle lowered, trembling, not from cold, but from something far deeper. The weight of unspoken fear and an urgent, aching need settled over him like a shroud. A sudden rustle nearby made him freeze, muscles taut and ready. Then, a massive silhouette emerged from the shadows, the bear, towering and imposing, with eyes reflecting a quiet intelligence. The bear's presence was both daunting and strangely comforting. The wolf's tense shoulders sagged slightly, relief flickering across his face. Slowly, he stepped forward, voice cracked and barely audible as he spoke. "I need your help." The bear's gaze was steady, unblinking, as if waiting for the wolf to explain, yet the night swallowed the words before they could fully form. Around them, the forest seemed to lean in, the silence stretching taut with unspoken questions and the weight of impending revelation. Something had driven the wolf to this desperate plea, something that shattered the natural order, something no one could have anticipated. Beneath the surface of their quiet encounter, a storm was gathering, one that would not only test their unlikely alliance, but challenge the very understanding of life in these woods. The wolf's plea was more than a cry for aid. It was the first tremor of a mystery so profound that it would leave even the most skeptical scientists utterly stunned. And as the night deepened, so did the shadow of what was to come. The bear's heavy breath mingled with the quiet night as he stepped closer to the wolf, the ground soft beneath their paws, muffling the sound of their movement. Moonlight caught on the bear's thick fur, revealing the subtle scars that traced his broad shoulders. Silent marks of battles and survival etched into his very being. His eyes, deep pools of amber and shadow, held a calm that contrasted sharply with the wolf's restless energy. For years, the bear had been a sentinel of this forest, a guardian of its ancient rhythms, bound to its cycles and secrets in ways few understood. The wolf, in contrast, seemed fragile, yet beneath that fragility was a raw, simmering tension. His lithe frame, honed for speed and stealth, now appeared diminished by weariness, as if the weight of unseen burdens pressed him down. His fur, once sleek and vibrant, hung in dull tangles, clinging to his ribs and hips. This was no ordinary night for him. It was a crossroads where past and present collided, where memories clawed their way to the surface and threatened to drown him. For years, these two had existed in parallel, creatures of the same wilderness, yet worlds apart in their ways and concerns. The wolf belonged to a pack that roamed the northern stretches of the forest, a tight-knit community built on loyalty and hierarchy. His place within it had once been secure, a rising star among the hunters, but something had shifted. A fracture deep within the pack's unity had begun to spread, a silent rot gnawing at the bonds that held them together. Whispers of betrayal and fear had reached even his ears. Murmurs carried on the wind like poisoned leaves. Meanwhile, the bear's domain lay in the ancient groves near the heart of the forest, a place where the trees rose tall and proud, their roots tangled in centuries of forgotten lore. He was a loner by nature, at peace with solitude, his life measured by the slow pulse of seasons. Yet beneath that stoic exterior, there was a guarded sorrow, an ache for connection buried beneath layers of pride and caution. The bear's world had been one of quiet endurance, but the wolf's arrival unsettled it, bringing with it a tremor of something unknown. As the wolf's eyes met the bear's, a flicker of vulnerability shone through the tension. "It's not just the pack," he whispered, voice rough and low. "Something's wrong, something beyond the usual struggles. The balance is breaking. The words hung in the cool air between them, fragile and heavy. The bear's gaze did not waver, but a subtle shift softened his stance, a silent acknowledgement of the wolf's hidden torment. The forest around them seemed to listen, the rustle of leaves barely audible against the pounding of their hearts. The scent of damp earth and decaying foliage filled their nostrils, grounding them in this moment of fragile trust. The wolf's mind raced, memories surfacing unbidden. A time when the pack had been whole, when laughter and howls had echoed under the same moonlit sky. But those days were slipping away, swallowed by shadows of suspicion and loss. A faint wind stirred, carrying with it the scent of distant smoke, a reminder of human encroachment upon their wilderness. The bear's ears twitched, alert to the subtle intrusion of another world pressing closer. He had long sensed the shifting tides beyond the trees, the machines, the roads, the relentless march of civilization. It was a threat to the forest's delicate web, to the very fabric of their existence. And now, with the wolf's plea hanging in the night air, the bear felt the stirrings of an uneasy alliance. Yet beneath the surface of their encounter lay unspoken questions and quiet fears. Could the bear trust the wolf's desperation, or was it a mask for something darker? Did the wolf's pack harbor secrets too dangerous to reveal? The bear's instincts told him caution, but something deeper urged him forward, a flicker of hope, or perhaps a shared loneliness. The wolf shifted uneasily, his muzzle twitching as he fought to suppress a shudder that had nothing to do with the cold. The weight of what he carried threatened to spill over, memories of loss and betrayal, of nights spent running from shadows that weren't just in his mind. The forest, once a sanctuary, now felt like a maze of threats and broken promises. In that suspended moment, the two creatures stood on the edge of something vast and unknowable. The night held its breath, the silence stretching taut with anticipation. Neither spoke again, but in their unspoken exchange lay a fragile thread, a spark that might kindle a bond strong enough to face what was coming. The bear's gaze drifted upward, catching the faint glimmer of stars obscured by the thick canopy. Somewhere beyond the trees, the forest whispered of change, of storms gathering unseen. And as the wolf's pleading eyes met his own once more, the bear sensed that their fates were now entwined in a story that neither could yet fully grasp. The night was still young, but the path ahead promised to test everything they believed about trust, survival, and the fragile balance between predator and protector. The bear's massive frame shifted slightly, a subtle movement almost lost in the night's stillness. But the wolf noticed. His eyes flicked toward the bear's paw, where a faint tremor betrayed a tension that contradicted the calm mask. For a moment, the bear's gaze wavered, as if caught between restraint and impulse. The wolf's heart thudded unevenly, a silent question posed by the unspoken tremble. Was the bear hiding something, or was this the weight of his own doubts clawing beneath the surface? A distant owl hooted, cutting through the silence like a sharp breath. The wolf glanced upward, catching the briefest glimpse of feathers against the moonlight before the night swallowed the sound again. The forest felt alive, a web of subtle signals and shifting shadows that neither creature could fully decipher. The wolf's instincts prickled uneasily, a warning that the world they knew was unraveling in ways more complex than mere survival. The bear's eyes darkened, narrowing just slightly, his nostrils flaring as if catching a scent that wasn't quite right. The wolf followed his gaze, scanning the underbrush, but saw nothing beyond the familiar shapes of moss and twisted roots. Yet, something lingered in the air, a hint of disturbance, a whisper of change that neither animal could name. The bear's silhouette seemed to stiffen, the quiet strength he exuded now tinged with a flicker of doubt. For a heartbeat, the wolf considered retreating, but some unspoken force rooted him to the spot. There was something about the bear's presence, something that both unsettled and anchored him. A question gnawed at the edges of his mind. Could this alliance, fragile and untested, withstand the unknown that pressed in from all sides? Or was it a desperate grasp at something that might crumble under scrutiny? The bear took a slow breath, the sound rumbling low in his chest, and the wolf caught a faint shudder ripple through his broad shoulders. It was the barest hint of vulnerability, fleeting yet unmistakable. The wolf's gaze softened, the hard edge of suspicion blurring into something more tentative, compassion perhaps, or the fragile beginnings of trust. Yet beneath it, a flicker of wariness remained, a silent question about what the bear was willing to reveal. Suddenly, the bear's head jerked toward a faint rustle, smaller, quicker than the usual forest sounds. The wolf's ears twitched, every muscle coiled, but the movement slipped away before either could identify it. A chill ran down the wolf's spine, not from cold, but from the sense that unseen eyes watched from the shadows, that the forest itself was holding secrets just out of reach. The wolf's mind spun with a new unease, a memory unbidden, not of loss or pain, but of a fleeting encounter long past. A flash of amber eyes, too close, too knowing, that had lingered in the periphery of his life like a ghost. Could it be connected? Was the shadow stalking them a remnant of something deeper, tangled in the very fabric of their existence? The bear's voice broke the silence, low and gravelly. "There's more than just the forest watching us tonight." His words carried weight, but also an edge of hesitation, as if he weighed the risk of sharing too much. The wolf nodded slowly, sensing that the bear's admission was both a warning and an invitation. A door cracked open on a darkness neither fully understood. Their breaths mingled in the cold air, a fragile rhythm of shared tension. The wolf noticed the bear's gaze flicker toward the distant ridge where the moonlight met the horizon, a place neither had ventured in seasons. The bear's posture shifted subtly, a silent decision forming beneath his calm exterior. The wolf felt it too, a stirring of something ancient and unresolved between them, a question hanging in the air. How far were they willing to go into the unknown? A breeze swept through the trees, carrying with it a scent both familiar and strange, a blend of earth and smoke, wildflowers and something metallic. The wolf inhaled sharply, the aroma pulling at threads of memory and instinct. The bear's ears twitched, and for a moment, their shared silence was broken by the forest's whisper, a language of rustling leaves and shifting shadows that neither fully grasped but both understood. The wolf's eyes met the bear's again, and in that gaze, an unspoken agreement took shape. This was no longer just a plea for help or a cautious meeting of old wilderness neighbors. It was the beginning of something uncertain and fragile, a pact forged in the twilight between fear and hope. Yet beneath the surface, questions remained about trust, about truth, about the shadows creeping closer with every passing moment. As the night deepened, the forest held its breath once more. The silence stretched taut with possibilities and dangers unseen. The wolf and the bear stood together, two creatures bound by circumstance and something more elusive, facing a future that neither could yet predict. And somewhere beyond, the eyes that watched waited patiently, knowing that the story unfolding was only just beginning. The forest held a breathless stillness as the wolf and bear moved cautiously through the underbrush, shadows stretching long beneath the silvered canopy. The wolf's muscles twitched with every step, nerves frayed by the weight of his confession and the bear's silent presence. The bear's strides were deliberate, heavy yet measured, each footfall sinking softly into the moss-laden earth. Neither spoke, but the tension between them hummed like a live wire, electric and raw. Suddenly, the bear halted, his keen eyes narrowing as he sniffed the air sharply. The wolf froze, following the bear's gaze toward a faint glimmer ahead, a crackling orange glow, flickering through the dense thicket like a secret heartbeat. The scent of smoke curled on the breeze, acrid and sharp, cutting through the earthy forest smells. The bear's ears twitched, alert and tense, his jaw tightening beneath a thick ruff of fur. "Fire," the bear rumbled, voice low and warning. "Not natural." "Someone's here." The wolf's eyes widened, a knot tightening in his chest. Fires in the forest were no mere threat. They were harbingers of destruction, often driven by human hands. But this was no careless blaze. It was contained, purposeful. The wolf's mind raced, piecing together a puzzle that suddenly expanded far beyond his fractured pack or the usual dangers of the wild. "Traps," the wolf whispered, his voice trembling. "Not just fire." "They're setting traps." The bear's gaze hardened. "We're not the only ones struggling to survive." They edged closer, moving with the precision born of years spent navigating hostile terrain. As they approached, the flickering light revealed more. a crude encampment hidden beneath the shelter of ancient pines. Tattered tarps flapped weakly in the night wind, and the faint clink of metal whispered from deeper within. The wolf's heart hammered. He recognized the signs immediately. Snares, wire snares and steel traps designed to catch not just game, but predators, wolves and bears alike. The bear's nostrils flared as he sniffed the ground, detecting the scent of human sweat. Sweat mixed with oil and chemicals, unmistakable markers of hunters and poachers. "This isn't just about survival anymore," the bear said grimly. "This is war." A sudden snap of a branch nearby shattered the fragile silence. Both animals spun toward the sound, muscles coiled for flight or fight. From the shadows emerged a figure, a human cloaked in camouflage, eyes sharp with cold calculation. In their hands, a rifle rested casually, but the glint of a tranquilizer dart tube caught the moonlight. The wolf's breath caught, a primal instinct urging retreat, but the bear planted his massive paws firmly, a low growl rumbling in his throat. The human froze, their eyes flicking between the two creatures, a predator and a sentinel of the forest. "Easy," the human said softly, voice steady but edged with urgency. "I'm not here to hurt you." The wolf's hackles remained raised, but the bear's gaze softened slightly, curiosity mingling with caution. The human stepped forward, a weathered face emerging from beneath a hood, eyes shadowed by fatigue and resolve. "My name is Carter," the human said, voice low. "I'm a wildlife researcher." The wolf blinked, the word researcher stirring a mix of skepticism and hope. The bear's stance relaxed, but his eyes never left Carter's, wary as ever. "There's something you need to see," Carter continued, pulling a small device from a pocket, a tablet glowing faintly in the dark. "Something that changes everything we thought we knew about this forest." The wolf edged closer, curiosity battling with distrust. Carter tapped the screen, revealing grainy images caught by hidden cameras. Footage of animals behaving strangely, disoriented, their movements erratic and unnatural. Wolves caught in the throes of aggression, not directed at their usual prey. Bears avoiding territories they once claimed without hesitation. And most unsettling of all, animals appearing sick, their eyes glassy, bodies thin and weak. "What's causing this?" the bear growled, the weight of the revelation sinking in. Carter's face tightened. "We're not sure yet, but it's spreading fast. A disease, chemical contamination. We found traces of industrial runoff in the streams, poison seeping into the veins of this forest." The wolf's amber eyes darkened with disbelief and fear. This was no longer a simple battle for territory or survival. It was a fight against an invisible enemy, one that could unravel the delicate balance of their world. "Your pack," Carter said, locking eyes with the wolf. "They're not just fracturing because of internal strife. They're sick, and if it's not stopped, it could wipe them out." The bear's massive head lowered, the weight of this grim news settling heavily. "And the traps? Poachers are taking advantage of the chaos," Carter replied grimly. "They're setting snares to catch anything that looks vulnerable. Wolves, bears, even deer. It's a feeding frenzy born of desperation and greed." The wolf's mind reeled. His plea for help had unearthed a deeper, darker crisis, one that threatened not only his pack, but the entire forest. His gaze flicked to the bear, searching for a flicker of hope or guidance. "We have to act," the bear said slowly, voice steady despite the storm of uncertainty. "This is no longer just about survival. It's about saving what's left." The wolf nodded, resolve hardening within him. "But how? We don't even know what we're fighting." Carter looked between them, a spark of determination igniting in his eyes. "We start by working together. You know this forest better than anyone. You can help us track the source of the contamination, and maybe we can find a way to stop it before it's too late." A heavy silence fell, broken only by the gentle crackling of the fire and the distant call of a night bird. The wolf felt the weight of the moment settle deep within his ribs, a turning point, not just for him or the bear, but for the entire wilderness. The forest, once a realm of familiar rhythms and age-old rivalries, had become a battleground for survival on a scale none had anticipated. The fragile alliance between predator and sentinel, wolf and bear, had shifted into something far more urgent, a pact forged not merely by circumstance, but by necessity. As the fire's glow flickered across the bear's scarred fur, and the wolf's amber eyes burned with newfound purpose, an unspoken truth crystallized between them. The story they thought they knew was unraveling, replaced by a harsher, more complex reality. One where survival meant confronting threats far beyond their primal instincts, where trust was no longer a luxury, but a lifeline. And as the night deepened, the forest whispered around them, its ancient trees seeming to bow under the weight of a secret now laid bare. The question lingered in the cool air: could they rise to meet this new challenge, or would the shadows creeping through the undergrowth consume everything in their path? The answer for now remained out of reach, but the journey had begun. The fire's glow wavered gently, casting flickering shadows that danced unevenly across the bear's fur and the wolf's tense muzzle. For a long moment, silence stretched between them, a silence so heavy it felt as if the forest itself had gone still, holding its breath alongside these two creatures, caught in the gravity of new, unsettling truths. The wolf's amber eyes lowered, fixed on the smoldering embers at their feet. His breathing, once sharp and ragged, slowed but remained uneven, as if the weight of the revelation sat like a stone in his chest, pressing down relentlessly. For years, he had believed the fractures within his pack were born of internal strife, rivalries, ambitions, the inevitable decay of loyalty. But now, with Carter's words echoing in his mind, the picture twisted into something far darker, more insidious. A tremor passed through his slender frame, barely perceptible but unmistakable to the bear standing close by. The wolf's ears twitched, flattening momentarily as if to shield himself from the noise of his own spiraling thoughts. He clenched his jaws, lips parting slightly to release a breath that caught somewhere between a sigh and a whisper. "Sick," he finally muttered, voice brittle. "They're my own pack, and I didn't see—" The bear's eyes softened, the usual stoic reserve giving way to something raw, an echo of shared pain. "It's easier not to see what you don't want to," he rumbled quietly, the deep timbre of his voice blending with the crackling fire. "Denial is a balm, but it burns when it slips away." The wolf's gaze flicked upward, meeting the bear's steady stare. A flicker of vulnerability passed between them, an unspoken acknowledgement of wounds deeper than scars or sickness. The wolf's posture sagged, shoulders lowering as if the invisible load had finally broken through the walls he'd built around himself. He caught a faint scent on the breeze, damp earth, smoke, and something metal-tinged that seemed to wrap around his mind, pulling him back to memories he had tried to bury. Memories of nights spent howling alone, the cold biting into his bones more than the wind ever could. Memories of faces once familiar, now twisted by pain and suspicion. The wolf swallowed hard, the taste of bitterness rising like bile. "I thought I was losing them to fear, to betrayal," he confessed, voice cracking. "But maybe it was something else all along." His eyes glistened, the faintest shimmer of unshed tears caught by the firelight. The bear shifted, the muscles beneath his thick fur flexing as he stepped closer, lowering his massive head in a gesture that was both protective and tentative. "It changes how you remember," he said softly. "The past, the moments you clung to, they feel different when you know the truth. It unsettles the ground beneath your paws." A deep, low growl rumbled in the wolf's throat, not from anger, but from grief. It was a sound born of helplessness, the kind that trembles on the edge of despair. His mind raced, questioning every choice, every alliance he had made. Had he been blind? Had his desperation to hold on to the pack blinded him to the sickness, eating it from within? The thought twisted painfully, a knife turned slowly. For the first time since the night began, the wolf's lips curled into a bitter, hollow smile. "If this is war," he said quietly, "then I'm not sure I'm ready." His voice was raw, stripped of bravado. Not just against poachers or fire, but against something invisible, something that turns kin into strangers. The bear's gaze lingered on the wolf, a flicker of empathy softening the hard lines of his face. "None of us are ready," he admitted, "but readiness isn't the choice here. It's survival. And survival demands facing the things we fear most, even if it means walking through the darkness alone. The wolf's eyes darted toward the darkened trees, where shadows pooled like ink, swallowing the edges of the firelight. The forest seemed to press in closer, its ancient presence both a comfort and a reminder of their fragile place within it. He could feel the weight of countless unseen eyes watching, some curious, some hungry, some hopeless. The line between predator and prey blurred in that moment, and the wolf's breath hitched as the enormity of their reality settled over him. A tremble ran through his limbs, not from cold, but from the raw ache of vulnerability. His paws dragged slightly in the soft earth as he shifted, the familiar landscape now alien. The wolf's mind flickered with doubts about his strength, his leadership, his ability to protect those he cared for. The doubt was a creeping shadow, relentless and insidious. The bear, sensing the shift, lowered his bulk to the ground beside the wolf, the earth trembling faintly beneath him. There was a long pause, filled only by the quiet crackle of dying flames and the distant call of a lone owl. The bear's gaze settled on the wolf's face, searching for fragments of hope amid the storm. "Trust," the bear said slowly, as if tasting the word for the first time. "It's fragile, hard-earned, and easily broken." His voice softened, revealing the scars beneath his strength. "But it's also the only thing that might save us now." The wolf's eyes met his, a fragile connection sparking in the space between them. His jaw clenched, then relaxed, the tension ebbing just enough to allow a whisper of something new to grow, tentative, hesitant, but real. "Then we start there," he breathed, "with trust. Even if it feels like the last thing I can give." The human, Carter, remained quiet, watching the exchange with a mix of reverence and uncertainty. His fingers traced the edge of the tablet, the glowing screen a faint pulse in the dark. He felt the weight of their shared burden pressing down, heavier than any data or scientific report. This was no longer just a study, it was a battle for survival, for meaning, for the fragile hope that something could be saved. Outside the circle of firelight, the night deepened, folding the forest into shadows that whispered secrets older than time. The trees swayed gently, their leaves murmuring in the breeze, a haunting lullaby for a wilderness on the brink. The wolf shivered again, but this time it was not cold. It was the tremor of awakening, the realization that the world he had known was irrevocably changed. For a moment all three sat in silence, their breath slow and measured, the enormity of the truth settling between them like a dense fog. The wolf's ears flicked toward a distant rustle, the bear's nostrils flared, and Carter's eyes narrowed, each sensing the fragile thread that connected them, fragile but unbroken. The journey ahead would be long and uncertain, filled with shadows and storms. But in this suspended moment, beneath the watchful gaze of the ancient forest, a quiet promise took root, that they would face the unknown together, carrying the burden of a truth that had shattered their worlds, and perhaps, in that shattering, forged a new path forward. The wolf sat alone beneath the towering oaks, the fire long since reduced to cold ash, a faint wisp of smoke curling into the still night air. Around him, the forest breathed its ancient lullaby, soft rustlings of leaves, the distant drip of unseen water, the low sigh of wind weaving through branches. Yet within, his world was anything but calm. The silence pressed in, heavy and unyielding, a vast emptiness that echoed with the tremors of his fractured soul. He curled into himself, fur damp and clinging, muscles taut beneath the thin veil of exhaustion. The moonlight slipped through the canopy in pale, fractured shards, casting ghostly patterns across his fur and the forest floor. It was a light both gentle and accusing, as if the very night bore witness to the turmoil churning within. His amber eyes, once sharp and fiery, now shimmered with the reflection of countless fears, some named, many buried deep beneath layers of instinct and memory. Memories surfaced unbidden, like phantoms drifting from the shadows. Faces and voices once etched in clarity blurred and twisted. Family, packmates, lost moments of warmth and betrayal. He saw the lean form of his mother, the softness of her eyes in the fading light of a distant dawn. a time before sickness seeped into their lives. Then came the harshness, the cold snap of loss, the silence where laughter should have been. The wolf's chest tightened as grief surged, a raw, lacerating ache that no amount of time could dull. He shifted, ears flicking against the night's veil. The scent of damp earth mingled with the faint trace of smoke still lingering from the fire, reminders of destruction and survival interwoven like a cruel tapestry. His mind spiraled, caught between the urge to flee from the weight of it all and the stubborn tether of duty that held him rooted. Guilt gnawed silently. Was he responsible? Had he failed those who had trusted him, who had looked to him for leadership and protection? The question hovered, unanswered, a shadow that refused to lift. Yet beneath the guilt was a flicker of relief, small and hesitant, but undeniable. Relief that at last the truth was no longer hidden behind whispered rumors or fractured trust, but laid bare in the stark light of reality. It was a bitter relief, like the first cold breath after a fever, sharp and unsettling. The wolf's gaze drifted upward, catching a flicker of starlight glimpsed between branches, a fragile pinprick of hope in a vast expanse of darkness. The contradictions unraveled within him, fear warring with hope, despair tangled with the faintest stirrings of resolve. He wrestled with the instincts honed by survival, those primal urges to retreat into silence and solitude, and the emerging need to confront a world that no longer made sense. The wolf's breath came slower now, a rhythm that echoed the slow pulse of the forest itself, steady yet fragile. In the quiet, he found himself tracing the lines of old wounds, both physical scars and those carved deeper into the bones of his being. The memory of his first hunt, the thrill of the chase, the bond of pack and purpose, all now tinged with the bittersweet ache of what had been lost. He saw the faces of his packmates, some distant, some estranged, now flickering like shadows on the edge of his mind, each a fragment of a fractured family. A sudden breeze stirred the leaves at his paws, carrying with it a scent that struck him with sudden clarity. A mingling of pine and damp moss, but beneath it, something metallic and faintly sour. The wolf closed his eyes, inhaling deeply, letting the aroma carry him back to a hidden place within himself. It was a place where love and fear intertwined, where the legacy of survival was etched not in triumph, but in the quiet moments between life and loss. He thought of the bear, steadfast, scarred, a sentinel of the ancient woods, and the fragile thread of trust they had begun to weave. That trust felt both a balm and a burden, a flickering flame that illuminated the shadows within. The wolf's heart clenched at the thought of alliance, of dependence, of stepping beyond the solitary path he had walked for so long. What did it mean to trust, to rely on another, when everything he had known was built on self-reliance and caution? His paws dug softly into the earth, the texture grounding him even as his thoughts drifted. The rough bark of the tree behind him pressed cool against his back, a silent witness to his solitude. In that stillness, the wolf felt the contours of his own identity blur and shift, no longer just a lone hunter, a fractured leader, but something more fragile, more uncertain. The weight of legacy pressed down, the stories carried in his blood, the unspoken promises to those who had come before and those yet to come. A subtle tremor ran through his limbs, a shiver not born of cold, but of exposure. The wolf's gaze dropped to a patch of moonlit moss, its green vibrancy a stark contrast to the dull ache inside. He saw himself reflected there, not in clear form, but as a ripple, a disturbance in the still surface, hinting at depths unknown and truths yet to be faced. Time stretched and folded around him, moments slipping into one another like the gentle flow of a hidden stream. Thoughts spiraled. What did it mean to fight a war not just against visible enemies, but against the unseen poisons that seeped into the roots of his world? Could he bear the weight of hope when hope itself seemed fragile, so easily shattered? The wolf's breath caught again, a soft exhale lost in the vastness of the night. He rose slowly, paws pressing into the soft earth, muscles aching from stillness and strain. The forest seemed to hold its breath with him, shadows shifting as if stirred by his movement. He paused beneath the gnarled branches, lifting his muzzle to the sky, tasting the cold air thick with ancient whispers. For a moment, The wolf allowed himself to simply be, not leader, not survivor, just a creature caught between past and future. The dichotomy of his existence lay bare, the fierce independence that had shaped him now challenged by the fragile threads of connection and vulnerability. He felt the pull of the pack, the pull of the bear, the pull of the forest itself, a web of belonging and loss that tangled his heart. The night stretched on endless and unfathomable, yet within its depths lay the faintest glimmer of a path not yet taken. The wolf's eyes closed briefly. A silent prayer whispered to the stars above. He did not ask for answers, only for the strength to face the questions, to walk forward into the unknown with the weight of all he carried balanced delicately upon his shoulders. And as the first light of dawn crept tentatively through the trees, the wolf stood alone, a solitary figure poised on the edge of transformation, forever changed but not yet broken. The first light of dawn was barely a whisper against the thick canopy when the fragile calm shattered like brittle glass. The wolf's pause, steady moments before, now carried him with a restless urgency, muscles taut beneath his fur as if he were a coiled spring barely held back. The forest, once a sanctuary cloaked in hushed shadows and gentle whispers, transformed into a stage set for chaos. A sudden, sharp crack echoed through the trees, splintering the silence. The wolf's ears snapped forward, alert, heart pounding like a drumbeat in the stillness. From the underbrush emerged a figure, but it was not the cautious human researcher, Carter, nor the familiar sentinel bear. This presence was different, wilder, more volatile. A lone wolf, but unlike any the protagonist had seen in years. His fur was matted and streaked with grime. His eyes burned with a fierce, unsettling light. He moved like a storm unleashed, every step a declaration of unrelenting purpose. The newcomer's gaze locked onto the wolf with a fierce intensity that sent a shiver racing down his spine. "You shouldn't be here," the newcomer growled, voice rough, edged with accusation and desperation. "You don't know what you're walking into." The wolf's breath caught, part fear, part defiance. He took a step forward, but his legs trembled beneath the weight of uncertainty. "I'm here because I have to be," he replied, voice low but steady, though the tremor was unmistakable. "The forest is dying. My pack is sick. We need to find the source." The newcomer's eyes narrowed, lips curling into a snarl that barely contained fury. "Your pack? You think this is just about your pack? You don't see the bigger picture." He paused, the tension between them crackling like static. "You don't know who's behind this, or what they're willing to do." The wolf's gaze flicked toward the shadows beyond, where the trees seemed to lean closer, as if eavesdropping on the confrontation. Something about the newcomer's words unsettled him deeply. He had believed, hoped even, that working with Carter and the bear might uncover the truth, might bring order to the chaos. Instead, it felt like he was being pulled deeper into a web tangled with secrets and dangers far beyond his grasp. Suddenly, a rustle in the bushes snapped both wolves' attention. The bear emerged, massive and imposing, his eyes dark pools of suspicion and concern. "What's going on here?" His voice was a low rumble, carrying the weight of authority and warning. The newcomer turned his fierce gaze on the bear, a flash of recognition flickering in his eyes. "You don't know me," he spat, "but I know what's happening. And if we don't act fast, it'll be too late." The bear's stance stiffened, muscles coiling beneath his thick fur. "We're already past too late," he said bitterly, "but we still have to try." The wolf watched the exchange, heart pounding harder, the fragile alliance he had started to build now fracturing before his eyes. The newcomer's presence felt like a storm surge crashing into the delicate peace, threatening to sweep it all away. "Why didn't you come sooner?" the wolf demanded, voice sharp with a mixture of frustration and fear. "Why wait until now to warn us?" The newcomer's eyes flickered with pain and anger. "Because you wouldn't listen. You were too busy trying to hold onto a pack already lost to sickness and suspicion. I tried to warn them, warn all of you, but the fear had already taken root. You think betrayal was the cause? No, it's something worse. Something that's been here longer than any of us." A sudden gust of wind swept through the trees, scattering leaves like frantic whispers. The sky darkened, heavy clouds rolling in as if the forest itself mirrored the growing tempest between the wolves. The air thickened with tension, every breath weighted, every sound amplified, the snap of a twig, the distant howl of a raven, the drip of unseen rain beginning to fall. The bear growled low, stepping between the two wolves. Enough. We don't have the luxury of division. His voice was firm, but beneath it lurked an edge of desperation. Whatever this is, it's bigger than any of us. We need a plan. Now. The newcomer's shoulders slumped for a fraction of a second, a flicker of vulnerability breaking through the fierce exterior. Fine, he muttered. But if we're going to do this, we need to move fast. The contamination is spreading. The traps aren't just from poachers anymore, they're bait. Lures for something far more dangerous. The wolf's mind reeled. He had thought the threat was human greed and carelessness, but now the line between natural and unnatural, predator and prey, blurred into a menacing unknown. He felt the old certainty slipping away, replaced by a gnawing doubt that clawed at his resolve. "Who's setting the traps?" the wolf asked, voice barely a whisper. The newcomer's eyes darkened. Not who, what? Before the wolf could respond, a sudden piercing scream tore through the forest. It was raw, primal, a sound soaked in pain and terror. All three creatures froze, ears pinned back, muscles coiled for flight or fight. The scream shattered the fragile calm like a stone through glass, sending a ripple of panic through the underbrush. "That came from the eastern ridge," the bear said grimly, eyes scanning the dark horizon. "Something's attacking." The wolf's breath hitched. The sickness, the traps, the poisoned streams, it had all been bad enough. But now, there was something more. An active, violent presence striking out from the shadows. "We need to move," the newcomer urged without hesitation. "If we don't get there first, more will fall." The wolf hesitated, a storm of emotions raging inside him, fear, anger, helplessness, and a flicker of hope ignited by the urgency. He looked to the bear, then back to the newcomer. The fragile thread of trust stretched thin but not yet broken. "Lead the way," he said, voice steady despite the turmoil. "But know this, I won't let the pack fall without a fight, not now." As the three vanished into the thickening gloom, the forest seemed to hold its breath once more, the growing storm above whispering promises of upheaval. Somewhere in the shadows, unseen eyes watched, waiting, as the delicate balance shattered and the true battle began. The night was no longer just a backdrop to their struggle. It had become a crucible, a place where alliances would be tested, secrets unveiled, and the very soul of the forest hung in precarious balance. The wolf's world had fractured irreparably, and the path forward was shrouded in uncertainty and danger. But there was no turning back now. Whatever was coming, it demanded everything, and the wolf was ready to face the storm, even if it meant walking through the darkness alone once more. The forest's dawn was no longer a promise of calm, but a canvas painted with shadows that clung stubbornly to the edges of waking light. The wolf moved silently, the weight of the night's revelations pressing deep into his bones. Yet, beneath that weight stirred something new, a gnawing uncertainty that tangled with the threads of his memories and the fragile alliances formed under moonlit skies. As they pressed toward the eastern ridge, the wolf's mind drifted back to a moment long buried, the first time he had met Carter. It had been months before the sickness took hold, before the pack's fractures grew wide and deep. Carter had arrived not just with his research, but with a quiet determination, eyes weary yet burning with purpose. There had been a fleeting exchange, a subtle gesture that, at the time, seemed inconsequential. Carter had handed the wolf a small, worn piece of bark, etched with strange symbols barely visible beneath layers of moss and dirt. The wolf had tucked it away without question, a curious token from a stranger. Now, with the forest unraveling and the poison seeping through its veins, the significance of that bark clawed its way back, sharp and insistent. The bear's heavy steps halted suddenly, breaking the wolf's reverie. A flicker of recognition passed between them, an unspoken understanding born not of words, but of shared histories and silent scars. The bear's gaze settled on the wolf's paw, where the bark rested, its rough edges catching the weak light. "Where did you get that?" the bear rumbled, voice thick with something more than curiosity. Was it warning, or something closer to dread? The wolf's ears flattened, heart pounding beneath his fur. "From the human," he admitted, voice low and guarded. "I thought it was a sign of goodwill. Now, I'm not so sure." The bear's eyes darkened, memories flickering behind them like distant thunderclouds. "That symbol," he whispered, "it's from the old rites, the ones our ancestors spoke of but we cast into shadow. It marked places of power, but also of warning, a boundary not to be crossed." A cold wind swept through the trees, as if the forest itself exhaled a breath long held. The wolf's gaze dropped to the bark again, the symbols twisting into new shapes in his mind. Suddenly, the sickness, the traps, the unnatural aggression, they did not seem isolated or random. They were the breaking of a seal, the disturbance of a line once respected and now shattered. The forest's balance was not merely threatened by humans or disease, it was unraveling because something ancient had been disturbed, something older than the pack, older than the sentinel bear's solitary watch. Flashbacks surged unbidden. The wolf saw himself as he had been weeks ago, standing at the edge of a forgotten glade, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. There, half buried beneath a tangle of roots, was a rusted metal box, forgotten by time but not by fate. Inside, Carter's voice echoed in memory. "This was left here long before us, a warning or a weapon, I don't know yet." The wolf had brushed it aside then, overwhelmed by the immediacy of sickness and survival. But now the box and its contents, the bark among them, loomed large, a key to understanding the true nature of the threat. The bear shifted, the muscles beneath his fur rippling with unease. The traps, they're not just human snares, they're part of a containment, a barrier meant to hold something in or keep something out. His voice dropped to a gravelly whisper. "We've been guarding this place without knowing it." The wolf's jaw clenched, the realization like ice crawling down his spine. His own desperation, the fractured loyalty of his pack, the creeping sickness, they were symptoms of a deeper wound, one inflicted long before they even came into this forest. The newcomer wolf's warning had hinted at this unseen enemy, but now it felt personal, inescapable. The wolf's mind flickered to Carter once more. Had the researcher truly been an ally, or had his presence been another ripple in a tide too vast to resist? Doubt clawed at the edges of the wolf's resolve. Had his plea for help, his alliance with the bear and the human, unwittingly played into a design far larger and more dangerous? The fragile trust forged under fire now felt brittle, shadowed by questions that had no easy answers. Was the sickness a natural decay, or a consequence of human interference tangled with ancient forces? Was Carter's research a beacon for salvation, or a beacon for something darker? The bear's gaze held steady, but there was a flicker of pain in his amber eyes, a memory of a time when solitude had been a shield, not a prison. "We've all been pawns," he said quietly, "but pawns can become players. We need to decide who we are, before the forest decides for us." The wolf's breath hitched, the weight of the moment settling like a stone in his chest. The pack was not merely fractured by sickness or fear, it was caught in a battle between seen and unseen, past and present, trust and betrayal. The human's presence, the newcomer's fierce warnings, the bear's silent sorrow, all threads now weaving into a tapestry both beautiful and terrifying. In that tangled web, the wolf glimpsed a mirror of his own struggle, the fierce independence that had once been his armor, now a fragile shell. The alliances formed in desperation were not just about survival, but about reclaiming agency in a story that had been written long before his birth. As the three moved forward, the forest seemed to lean closer, its ancient trees whispering secrets that only the brave or the broken dared to hear. The bark in the wolf's paw pulsed faintly, a heartbeat in the quiet, a link to a past that refused to be forgotten. The wolf's eyes met the bear's again, a silent question lingering between them. In this fractured world, who could truly be trusted? And what price would they pay to protect the fragile balance now slipping through their claws? The answer was buried beneath layers of shadow and light, waiting to emerge, not in the roar of battle, but in the quiet moments when the forest held its breath, and the truth whispered through the leaves. Beneath the heavy canopy, where light flickered feebly through fractured leaves, the wolf sat alone, the weight of the forest's secrets settling like ash around him. His paws trembled, pressed against the cool earth, each breath ragged and uneven, as if the very air conspired to constrict his chest. The once familiar world seemed to close in, dense shadows wrapping tight like chains forged from doubt and despair. The night had stretched endlessly before him, a vast emptiness punctuated only by the distant drip of moisture falling from leaf to leaf. Somewhere far off, a lonely owl's call echoed, a sound both haunting and hollow, but the wolf heard none of it. His senses, usually sharp and alert, dulled beneath the crushing weight of revelation and loss. His amber eyes stared into the darkness, but there was no focus, no anchor. Memories rose unbidden, fragmented and jagged. Faces of packmates blurred into shifting phantoms, friends turned foes, allies now strangers. The sickness that had crept through his family was not just a disease of flesh, it was a contagion of trust, fracturing bonds until all that remained was silence. The bark in his paw, the symbol from a forgotten past, pulsed faintly, a heartbeat at odds with the stillness around him. It was a reminder, a mark of a boundary crossed, a line broken. He had hoped it would be a sign of hope, a talisman against the darkness closing in. Instead, it felt like a curse, a chain pulling him deeper into the unknown. His mind reeled with questions that offered no answers. Had his plea for help, his fragile alliance with the bear and the human, only hastened the unraveling? Was the sickness a natural decay or a consequence of ancient forces disturbed and human greed entwined? Trust, once an unbreakable thread woven through the fabric of his life, now felt shredded and raw. The wolf's muzzle twitched, nostrils flaring as he caught the faintest scent, smoke, damp earth, and something metallic, sharp and sour. It was the scent of destruction and betrayal, of promises made and broken beneath the canopy's watchful gaze. A shiver ran through him, not born of cold but of dread, of the vast loneliness that had settled in his bones. He shifted, muscles stiff and aching from hours of stillness. The forest around him felt vast and unyielding, an endless expanse where every shadow whispered of threats unseen and dangers unspoken. The silence pressed close, thick and suffocating, broken only by the soft rustle of leaves stirred by a restless wind. It was a silence heavy with grief and foreboding, as if the forest itself mourned what was lost and feared what was coming. A sudden flicker of movement caught the corner of his eye, a sliver of light dancing along a broken branch. His head snapped up, ears twitching, heart stuttering in his chest. But it was only a moth, its fragile wings beating against the encroaching dark. The wolf exhaled slowly, a breath trembling with exhaustion and resignation. He curled inward, folding his body tight, as if to shield himself from the world's harsh truths. The bark pressed cold against his paw, a silent witness to his unraveling. His thoughts fractured into shards, hope and despair, courage and fear, trust and betrayal, each vying for dominance in the shadowed corners of his mind. "Can I still lead?" he whispered, voice cracked and raw. "Or am I already lost?" The question hung heavy in the air, unanswered, as if swallowed by the forest's endless night. From the periphery, the faintest rustle stirred his attention. The bear emerged slowly, massive and solemn, eyes reflecting a quiet sorrow. There was no comfort in his presence tonight, only a shared weight, an unspoken acknowledgement of the cost they both bore. The bear's gaze settled on the wolf, steady and unflinching. "We are running out of time," he rumbled softly, voice low and grave. "The forest's heart is bleeding, the sickness spreads. And with it, the fractures deepen." The wolf's eyes met the bear's, searching for a flicker of hope in those amber depths. Instead, he found only the reflection of his own uncertainty. "I don't know if I'm strong enough," the wolf admitted, voice barely audible. "Not for this, not for what's coming." The bear lowered his massive head, close enough that their breaths mingled in the cold air. "Strength isn't about facing the storm unbroken," he said. "It's about standing when everything inside you wants to fall." The wolf's jaw clenched, a bitter smile ghosting his lips, a smile without humor or relief, only the hollow recognition of truth. He had crossed a threshold tonight, one from which there was no retreat. The path back to innocence, to hope untouched by shadow, had vanished beneath his paws. Suddenly, a sharp gust swept through the trees, scattering leaves like whispered warnings. The wolf's ears flattened, muscles tensing as a distant howl shattered the fragile calm, a sound raw with pain and fury, a call from the wild that seemed to tear through the very fabric of the night. "It's spreading," the wolf said, voice tight with despair. Not just sickness but fear, rage, desperation. The bear's gaze darkened, heavy with the knowledge of battles fought and lost. "And soon, it will reach us all." The wolf's thoughts spiraled, caught between the past and the looming unknown. The pack that had once been his family was now a fractured shadow, consumed by sickness and suspicion. The alliances forged in desperation felt fragile, brittle as dried leaves beneath a winter's frost. He rose slowly, muscles protesting, as if the weight of the world was draped across his shoulders. The bark in his paw felt colder now, a silent verdict of the path he had chosen. He lifted his muzzle to the sky, tasting the cold air thick with ancient whispers and unspoken threats. "I can't go back," he breathed, voice steady despite the tremble beneath. "Not after tonight, not after the truth." The forest seemed to lean in, shadows deepening, as if acknowledging the irrevocable shift. The wolf's amber eyes burned with a fierce light, not of hope, but of resolve forged in the crucible of loss and fear. He turned toward the distant ridge where darkness gathered like a storm, where the next chapter awaited beyond the threshold. The path was shrouded in shadow, uncertain and perilous, but there was no other way. The bear followed silently, a sentinel bound by duty and shared fate. Together, they stepped forward into the deepening gloom, the fragile thread of their alliance taut and unbroken, yet strained beneath the weight of what was to come. The wolf's heart hammered a steady rhythm, a pulse of defiance amidst the encroaching night. The line had been crossed, the die was cast, there was no turning back. In the silence that followed, the forest held its breath once more. The story was no longer one of survival alone. It was a reckoning, a turning point where the shadows would either consume or be faced head-on. And the wolf, standing on the edge of all he had known, was finally ready to face the darkness within and without. No longer a lost leader, but a warrior shaped by grief, trust shattered and reforged, and a fierce, unyielding will to fight for what remained. The final act was waiting, just beyond the horizon, and with a last, steady breath, the wolf stepped into the unknown. The wolf stood at the edge of the ridge, the forest sprawling beneath him like a wounded beast. The first pale light of dawn crept through the trembling leaves, casting long, fractured shadows that seemed to claw at the ground. His amber eyes, once flickering with doubt, now burned with a fierce, unyielding resolve. The weight of everything, loss, betrayal, sickness, and secrets, pressed heavily upon his shoulders, but it no longer crushed him, it sharpened him. Beside him, the bear's massive frame rose like a living bulwark, silent yet unshakable. The air was thick with a tension that thrummed like the low growl of distant thunder, a storm waiting to break. Between them, the fragile alliance held, but for how long? The wolf's gaze drifted toward the darkened forest, where the lingering scent of smoke and poison still clung to the earth. This was no longer a battle of survival alone. It was a reckoning with truths long buried beneath the roots. "I can't keep running," the wolf said, his voice low but steady, cutting through the morning hush. "Not from what's inside me, not from what's tearing the pack apart. I have to face it, all of it." The bear's deep eyes met his, reflecting both caution and understanding. "Facing the past means risking everything," he rumbled, "but hiding in the shadows will only let the sickness spread." The wolf's jaws clenched, the memories flashing unbidden, faces of packmates twisted by fear and pain, the betrayal that wasn't betrayal but sickness. The fragile trust shattered like brittle ice. He had long carried the burden of leadership alone, but now he understood that alone was a path to ruin. There was a choice before him, stark and unforgiving, to confront the poison at its source or to retreat into the fading safety of denial, to step into the darkness where no light had dared to linger, or to let the forest fall piece by piece into oblivion. "I'm going to the heart of it," he declared, voice firm, the tremor of hesitation replaced by clarity. to find what's poisoning this place and stop it. Even if it means losing what little remains. The bear nodded, muscles tensing as the forest seemed to pulse around them. Then we move together, but know this, once you cross this line, there's no turning back. A sudden rustle shattered the stillness, and the newcomer wolf emerged from the shadows, eyes sharp and wary. "You're not ready," he snarled, voice edged with desperation. "This isn't a fight you can win with courage alone." The protagonist met the gaze without flinching. "Maybe not," he admitted, "but I'd rather fall fighting than live as a ghost in my own pack." The newcomer's snarl softened into a grim nod, tension shifting but unresolved. "Then let's hope it's enough." As the three converged, the forest around them seemed to close in, the air thick with unseen eyes and whispered threats. The broken bark, the ancient symbol etched in its grain, felt warm in the wolf's paw, a fragile talisman of a past they could no longer ignore. It was a reminder that some doors, once opened, could never be closed. With a final, steadying breath, the wolf stepped forward, crossing the threshold into the unknown. The forest exhaled, shadows swirling as if stirred by his choice. Somewhere deep within, a silent tremor rippled, the first sign that the world was shifting, that consequences were awakening. No longer a victim of circumstance, he was now the architect of what would come. The fragile threads of trust, betrayal, and survival had woven into a tapestry of irrevocable change. The path ahead was dark, riddled with peril, but it was his to walk. And as the sun pierced the canopy, scattering shards of light like fractured hope, the wolf embraced the storm rising within and beyond, the storm that would decide the fate of all they held dear. The ridge stood silent beneath a sky thick with bruised clouds. The dawn's fragile light suffocated beneath a heavy grey dome. The forest below, once a mosaic of life and sound, had fallen muted, its usual chorus stilled as if nature herself held her breath. The air hung dense and electric, pregnant with anticipation, each breath drawn sharp and shallow, a fragile tether to the moment before everything shattered. The wolf's amber eyes flicked over the horizon, restless and haunted, reflecting the storm gathering both outside and within. His muscles, taut and coiled like a predator poised to spring, betrayed no ease. A cold sweat slicked the fur along his spine, though the chill was not from the morning air but from the dread nesting deep in his gut. The weight of his choice pressed relentlessly, a burden both liberating and crushing. There was no path back, no refuge in denial or retreat. The poison coursing through the forest and his pack was a slow-acting poison within himself, gnawing at his resolve and identity. Beside him, the bear's massive silhouette was a dark monolith against the dim sky, still and immovable, yet charged with the same restless energy. Their shared silence was thick with meaning, a taut wire strung between two warriors bound by necessity, but not yet by trust. No words passed. They were unnecessary, perhaps even dangerous. Instead, their gazes locked and parted, flickers of unspoken fears and fragile hopes playing across their faces. Every glance was a question, every pause a negotiation, a testament to the fragile alliance teetering on the edge of fracture. The newcomer wolf lingered in the shadows nearby, a restless figure whose presence was a sharpened edge in the quiet. His eyes burned with a mixture of bitterness and warning, a living reminder of fractures yet to heal and secrets yet to surface. When he spoke, it was a low growl barely rising above the muted wind, heavy with accusation and a grim certainty. But the words felt suspended, unfinished, an echo lost in the vast tension that swallowed the space between them all. Around them, the forest seemed to recede, its ancient trees looming like silent sentinels, their gnarled branches blotting out what little light dared to filter through. Time slowed, stretched thin and fragile, each second lingering like a held breath. The rustle of leaves, the distant drip of water from dew-laden branches, even the faintest crack of a twig became thunderclaps in the hush. The horizon waited, a dark wound bleeding shadows, as if the earth itself braced for the coming upheaval. The wolf's mind raced in spirals, fury barely contained, terror simmering beneath a veneer of control. Memories collided with present fears, faces twisted by sickness, The betrayal that wasn't betrayal. The fragile trust dissolving into suspicion. His heart hammered with a desperate question. How much could he endure before breaking? How long before the storm inside him mirrored the one gathering overhead? A sudden gust stirred the air, carrying with it the scent of smoke and something metallic, an acrid promise of destruction. The wolf's ears flattened, nostrils flaring as instincts screamed warning, yet movement was minimal, controlled, a dance of restraint in a world that demanded violence. The bear's rumble was a low vibration in the earth, a silent grounding force that held the wolf tethered even as shadows grew. The newcomer shifted, the tension rippling outward like a stone cast into still water. Their eyes met, the wolf's and the newcomer's, charged with unspoken histories and unresolved fears. No words bridged the gulf, only a heavy silence that screamed louder than any howl. It was a moment suspended between confrontation and capitulation, a fragile pause before a collision inevitable yet undefined. The wolf's breaths came slower now, measured but shallow, each inhale a battle against rising panic. His paws dug into the soil beneath, the rough texture grounding him even as his mind threatened to unravel. Behind him, the bear's presence was a solid weight, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, they were not alone. Yet the path ahead was shrouded in uncertainty, an impenetrable veil hiding horrors unseen and consequences unknown. In this crucible of silence, every heartbeat thundered. Every shadow seemed to lean closer. The forest was waiting, and so was the storm. The knot tightened, the breath held. The breaking point loomed just beyond the fragile edge of dawn. The wolf's world shattered in a single breath. No warning, no mercy. The air around the ridge thickened, as if the forest itself exhaled a shuddering gasp, and everything he had clung to unraveled like tattered threads in a storm. "You lied to me!" the wolf snarled, voice cracking with raw fury that tore out of his chest like a wildfire. His amber eyes blazed, unblinking, fixed on Carter, the human whose presence had been both a beacon and a shadow from the start. "All this time, you fed me half-truths. You knew what was poisoning the forest. You knew what was eating away at my pack." Carter's face, worn by sleepless nights and haunted by unspoken burdens, was pale in the dim dawn. His fingers trembled around the tablet he'd carried everywhere, the device glowing faintly like a dying ember. "I didn't lie," he whispered, voice trembling but steady. "I was afraid that if the truth came out, it would destroy everything we were trying to save." The wolf's jaws clenched, teeth grinding as painful truths crashed over him like jagged waves. "You withheld the real source, the ancient contamination buried beneath the roots. The metal box, the symbols, you knew it wasn't just pollution or sickness. You let us fight shadows while the real poison spread beneath our feet." Beside him, the bear growled low, a rumble heavy with betrayal and sorrow. "We trusted you," he said, voice thick with grief. "You were supposed to be the bridge between two worlds. Instead, you built a wall." The wind tore through the ridge, whipping loose leaves into frenzied spirals, as if the forest echoed their anguish. The wolf's body shook, not from cold, but from the raw, searing pain of shattered trust. His legs buckled and he dropped to the earth, fur bristling as tears welled unbidden, blurring the edges of his fury and despair. "I believed you," the wolf choked out, voice ragged, "because I wanted to believe there was hope, that we could fix this without losing everything." He slammed a paw onto a jagged stone, claws scratching deep grooves into its surface, a desperate, silent scream carved in granite. "But you left us to rot in the dark." Carter's eyes glistened with unshed tears, his shoulders sagging under the weight of confession. "I thought if I told you, you'd stop me. You'd abandon the research. It's not just sickness, it's a curse, an ancient one, tied to the forest's deepest wounds, awakened by human greed and neglect." The wolf's breath hitched as the unbearable truth crashed through him. His identity, the proud leader, the protector, fractured under the revelation. The sickness wasn't just a disease, it was a reckoning, a punishment cast long ago, now unleashed because of their intrusion. "No wonder the pack turned on each other," the wolf whispered, voice hollow. "It wasn't fear or betrayal, it was poison in their blood, in their very souls." The bear lowered his massive head, a deep growl vibrating through the earth. We are part of this forest. Its wounds are our wounds, and now its curse is ours to bear. The wolf's sob broke free then, raw and unfiltered, years of grief, guilt and rage pouring out in a torrent that left him trembling, broken. He collapsed fully onto the rocky ground, the bark with the ancient symbol slipping from his grasp, falling to shatter against the stones below. A fragile talisman broken, like the illusions he once held. "I don't know who I am anymore," the wolf gasped between ragged breaths. Leader, survivor, or just another ghost lost to this poison. The dawn's pale light bled into the sky, cold and unyielding. There was no going back, no reclaiming the past. The wolf lay there, stripped bare, his soul exposed to the merciless truth. But beneath the devastation, something stirred, a flicker of clarity born from the ruins. The sickness, the lies, the curse. They could never be undone, but they could be faced, together. Carter knelt beside him, voice steady though fragile. "We have to fight, not just for the pack, but for the forest itself. For all of us." The bear's gaze met the wolf's, a silent vow passing between them, a promise forged in shattered trust and unbearable truths. The wolf rose slowly, every muscle aching, every breath a battle won. He was no longer the leader who had sought easy answers or half-truths. He was something new, scarred, raw, and unbreakable in his resolve. The forest held its breath once more, shadows folding into the breaking day. The story had fractured beyond repair, but from the shards, a fierce new purpose emerged. The wolf's amber eyes burned with a fierce light, the dawn of a reckoning that could not be ignored. The past was gone, the future was their fight, and they would face it, no matter the cost. The forest breathed softly, a gentle murmur beneath the fading light of dusk. The wolf stood alone once more, perched on the ridge where countless nights ago his journey had begun, with trembling steps and desperate pleas. Now, his amber eyes held a quiet depth, a reflection not just of the stars above, but of the storm he had weathered within. The weight of loss still pressed against his ribs, but it was tempered by the steady pulse of something new, understanding. He traced a paw slowly over the worn bark, the broken talisman that had once symbolized a boundary crossed, a secret revealed. Now, cracked and faded, it carried the echoes of a past, no longer shrouded in mystery, but etched into the fabric of his being. It was no longer a curse alone, but a testament to endurance, a reminder that even shattered things hold meaning. The memories that had haunted him, the faces of packmates lost to sickness and shadow, the bitter betrayals born not of malice but of a poison unseen, now settled into a somber mosaic. He saw them not as fractures to be mourned endlessly, but as threads woven into the tapestry of survival. The howl that once rose from his throat in anguish now carried a steadier, mournful cadence, acknowledging the pain, but refusing to be defined by it. Beside him, the bear's silhouette emerged from the gathering twilight, slow and deliberate. No words passed between them, only the shared breath of a bond forged through fire, fear, and fragile trust. The sentinel's eyes met the wolf's, and in their depths lay a silent promise. They would carry the scars of this battle, but they would do so together, guardians of a forest still whispering ancient secrets. The wolf's thoughts drifted back to that silent night beneath the gnarled oak, when the forest seemed to hold its breath and his plea had echoed into the dark. Then, hope had been a fragile flame flickering on the edge of despair. Now, it was a quiet ember, steady and resilient, not a cure, but a companion. A soft wind stirred the leaves, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and distant rain. The forest was healing, slowly, imperfectly, as was he. The sickness had not been vanquished, the traps not all dismantled, but the reckoning had begun. In the stillness, there was space for grief and for growth, for the echoes of what was lost and the faint outlines of what might yet be. The wolf lifted his muzzle, breathing in the cool air heavy with promise and peril. He did not know what paths lay ahead, only that he would walk them with eyes open, no longer a lone hunter chased by shadows, but a creature shaped by the relentless tides of trust, loss, and hope. Turning from the ridge, the wolf's steps were measured, each pawfall steady as dusk folded into night. The forest's song rose softly around him, a lullaby of endings and beginnings intertwined, as ancient and enduring as the earth beneath his feet. If this story has stirred something within you, share your thoughts below. What would you have done in his place? If you felt the weight of his journey, please like and subscribe to follow the path as it unfolds. The forest is vast, and the story, like life itself, is never truly finished. Thank you for walking this road with us.